Hello, welcome to another assembly with myself, Mr. Bennett. A couple of things this week, starting with some updates. As you know, you'll have Google Classrooms now and access to that. Your parents received information as to how you can log on, and we can see that there's only a couple of people who haven't managed to log on yet, and we're working to support you to get on there. Please remember, in your Google Classrooms, that's a good way for you to connect with your teachers. If you have any questions about your work, you can ask them in the stream of the classroom that you're in. Please keep in mind, if you have a remote learning session and you've got an online session with a member of staff in your class, just to keep other students in mind, it's important that you keep your mic muted when you go onto the classroom. It's important that you keep it muted until you want to ask a question. Pop your hand up if you want to ask a question, and wait for the teacher to select you. Or you can use the chat function at the side to ask questions or answer questions there as well. And make sure that if you can, set your camera up in a place where you're not going to be distracted or create any distractions for other people. As you know, your parents have had a year team bulletin on Mondays that has been emailed home. Now we want to move from using that bulletin feature to actually having a classroom that you can get the notices in yourselves. So if you look on your classroom feed, there'll be a classroom for your year group, and we'll be sharing some notices through that classroom itself. So that's it for my notices, for my updates, and I wanted to think about a theme this week, and it's absolutely impossible not to discuss this theme. It's everywhere at the moment. You'll have noticed last week, if you've got social media like I have, you'll have noticed in lots of your feeds the hashtag Black Lives Matter. If you're on Instagram, you might have noticed on Tuesday that there was hundreds, thousands of tiny black squares with the hashtag Blackout Tuesday. And I wanted to think about, what is all of this about, and what does it have to do with us as people? So on the 25th of May, a Minneapolis man, George Floyd, died after he was stopped by the police and he was restrained. So at the protests, you might have seen people chanting "I can't breathe" and kneeling on one knee, and they're recreating the time when George Floyd was restrained, leading to his death. Now, he was suspected of using some fake money, fake banknotes, but the way the police had restrained him led to his death. Now, as a result, 4 police officers have been sacked, and the protests from George Floyd's death have very much evolved to challenge both the treatment of people of colour by the police force in America and also across society. So this has led also to peaceful protests around the world, from Manchester to Liverpool to across the UK. So this might have got you thinking, what can you do to make a difference? What can we do to get on board with this? How should we react? Should we join a protest? Should we be in these peaceful protests? What's the best way for us to make a change in society? It led me to think about the image that you can see here. It's from a classic study, and I shared this with some of my sociology students. It's a study by a lady called Jane Elliott from 1968 called Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes. And I'm going to put a link in the description below in this YouTube clip so that you can have a look at a YouTube clip explaining exactly what happens in this study. Now, essentially, Jane Elliott finds out that people's prejudice is something that they can learn. And if you can learn being prejudiced, you can unlearn that as well. So how can we make a difference? I think the main key is educating ourselves, being aware of what's happening around us. Now, Jane Elliott talks about this idea of being colourblind, and you might have heard people say in the past things like, "I don't see people as black or white, I see everyone as exactly the same." Now, in terms of dealing with racism and in society, that's not enough. It's not enough to see everyone as one group of people. We have to acknowledge some of the battles that certain groups have been through. We have to acknowledge that some people are coming from a disadvantaged position because of the way that people have been treated in the past and racism across society. So I want us to think about how can we become better allies to people of colour. And I think one way is really to read up on some of the struggles that people have had. I think it's important to understand the challenges that different communities have faced. And I want to put a couple of links again down in the description here to places you can go to have a bit of a read about, to understand more about racism in society. Now, how can we be better allies? It doesn't always mean intervening in a harmful situation. It might mean, that you challenge racism, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to put yourself in a position where you're vulnerable. It means telling an adult if you see something happening that you're not happy with, if you see someone calling someone a racist name or treating someone unfairly. It means being humble, being aware, and first of all, it means listening. And to listen, we've got to read up, we've got to learn more, we've got to look at the past and struggles people have faced to understand racism in wider society. So I'm going to suggest a couple of places to look. One of these places is the Anthony Walker Foundation. Now, in 2005, Anthony Walker was brutally murdered on the streets of Liverpool in a racist attack. And his mother, G. Walker, is one of the most inspirational women I've ever encountered, who's actually said that she forgives Anthony's killers. Now, there's a foundation set up to tackle racism in society, and there's some really interesting information on their website, so that's a useful place to look. The place to look is the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust. Now, Stephen Lawrence was murdered in a racist attack back in 1993, some time ago, but actually his murder led to the police being looked at and a report called the McPherson Report coming out, looking at how the police deal with people from black and minority ethnic communities and how they can do that more fairly. Again, it's another place to look and read and educate yourself. I'd also suggest, if you're in year 10, 11, 12 or 13, taking a look at this book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Remy Eddo-Lodge. I read this 2 years ago, and it's absolutely amazing read in terms of discovering some of the deeply rooted racism in society and talking about the frustration of people from black and minority ethnic communities in how white people aim to support with that racism and how people need to change the way that they look at things. So I'll leave you with the challenge of being better allies, sticking up for people, challenging racism in society, looking out for opportunities to celebrate diversity. And if anyone can take that challenge, I know it's our school community. If anything, we've seen with the work of Educate and Celebrate across the school community, a massive celebration of diversity and equality. And you guys are absolutely brilliant at that. But now is the time, more so than ever, to be thinking about creating equality in our society and celebrating diversity. Take care and stay safe.